The knife gleamed under the security camera's cold light as my brother staggered around my daughter's wheelchair van, his drunken rage visible even through the grainy footage. Emily's small hand clutched mine as we watched the monitor, her 12-year-old voice barely a whisper. Is that a key, Mom? No, baby, I said, already dialing 911. It's a knife. 3 weeks ago, I'd been unconscious in a hospital bed when Michael sold this van, Emily's lifeline, her independence. Now he was trying to destroy what he couldn't steal again. As red and blue lights flooded our driveway and officers tackled my brother to the ground, I realized this moment had been years in the making. My name is Diane Miller, and this is the story of how I destroyed my family to save my daughter. The awakening. The first thing I noticed when I woke up in the hospital was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the hollow echo of my own breathing that somehow carried the weight of knowing something was terribly wrong. The antiseptic smell burned my nostrils, and the fluorescent lights above seemed to pulse in rhythm with the dull ache radiating from my ribs and left leg. The doctor had told me earlier I was lucky to be alive. The hit and run had done significant damage. We're looking at weeks of recovery, he'd said matter-of-factly, flipping through my chart. 4 broken ribs, a fractured tibia, and a mild concussion. The driver never even slowed down. I nodded, thoughts immediately turning to Emily, my 12-year-old daughter with spinal muscular atrophy, staying with my best friend Sarah while I healed. Sweet, perceptive Emily, who'd already lost her father 3 years ago and now had to cope with her mother's absence too. The weight of that thought pressed against my chest more painfully than the broken ribs. The silence broke when Sarah burst into my room, her face flushed and hands trembling. Her hair was messier than usual, strands escaping from her normally perfect ponytail, a sure sign she'd been running her fingers through it, something she only did when deeply distressed. Diane, I'm so sorry. I tried to stop him, but her voice cracked, eyes brimming with tears. A chill ran down my spine, cutting through the haze of pain medication. Stop who? What happened? Is Emily okay? The heart monitor beside me began beeping faster. Emily's fine. She's with Lisa at physical therapy. Sarah moved closer, taking my hand. It's the van. Michael sold it. My mind went blank. What van? Our accessible van? The one Emily uses? The words came out garbled, as if my brain couldn't process what she was saying. Your brother came with some paperwork while you were unconscious. He said you'd authorized the sale. Sarah's grip tightened on my hand. I tried to tell him it couldn't be right, that you'd never sell it without arranging alternative transportation for Emily first, but he had documents with your signature. I called a lawyer right away, but by then, the world tilted sideways. The accessible van was our lifeline, custom fitted for Emily's wheelchair, modified for her independence. We'd saved for years, finally buying it with Thomas's life insurance money after he passed away from cancer 3 years ago. Emily called it her freedom machine. It was the one thing that allowed her to travel to school, therapy sessions, and art classes without feeling different from other kids. That's impossible, I whispered, my throat constricting. He can't. I never. I tried calling your parents, Sarah continued, her voice lowering as if sharing a shameful secret. They said they knew about it. Your mother told me it was a family financial decision and that I should mind my own business. My fingers shook as I reached for my phone on the bedside table. The effort sent a bolt of pain through my ribs, but I ignored it. My mother answered on the third ring, her voice cool and controlled as always. Diane, are you calling about the van? Michael said he talked to you about it. No greeting, no concern about my condition, just straight to defending her precious son. Mom, I'm in the hospital. How could I have talked to him about anything? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, tight, strained. Don't be dramatic. Emily barely leaves the house anyway. The dismissal of my daughter's active life stung like a slap. Michael needed the money for an investment opportunity, and you weren't using it. It's been sitting in your driveway most days. The familiar ice in her voice froze my veins, transporting me instantly to childhood. Always second best, always too emotional, always making things difficult. I'd spent 46 years being gradually conditioned to doubt myself when confronted with that tone, but not anymore. Not when it came to Emily. Flashback, the Golden Sun. Growing up in suburban Minnesota, I learned early that family had a hierarchy. Michael, 3 years older, was the golden child, the son who would carry on the family name, the future businessman who would make our parents proud. I was the afterthought, the daughter who needed to understand her place. I was 7 when I first clearly recognized the pattern. It was Christmas morning, and we were opening presents in our matching pajamas, the fireplace crackling merrily in the background, a perfect family tableau. Michael unwrapped the latest gaming console, eyes wide with excitement. Minutes later, I opened a small box containing a simple charm bracelet. Why does Michael get a Nintendo and I get a bracelet? I asked, confused by the obvious disparity. Mom smoothed my hair with practiced patience. Boys need more support for their development, she explained as if reciting from a parenting manual. Your brother is building skills for his future. Besides, jewelry is more appropriate for a young lady. Dad nodded approvingly at her explanation, then turned his attention back to helping Michael set up his new console. The message was clear. Michael's desires were investments. Mine were indulgences. When I graduated with honors in literature from the University of Minnesota, Dad merely nodded, distracted by a call from Michael who was struggling through business school. That's nice, honey, he said, covering the mouthpiece briefly. We'll celebrate later. Later never came, because Michael needed help with his term project. But when Michael barely passed business school 2 years after that, they threw an elaborate party at the country club. He worked through significant challenges, Mom explained to puzzled relatives aware of my academic achievements. That shows character and perseverance. Anyone can succeed when things come easily. And when I married Thomas, a quiet systems engineer who valued stability over flash, my father pulled him aside at our wedding. I wasn't meant to hear their conversation, but I was looking for Mom and paused outside the study door. Take care of her, Dad said, not as a threat, but as if passing a burden. She's always been the emotional one in the family. Sensitive. You'll need patience. Thomas had smiled politely, but later told me, they have no idea who you really are. He was right. Behind my quiet exterior was steel my family never bothered to notice. For years, I'd managed the household finances while Thomas focused on his programming projects. I'd negotiated Emily's medical care with insurance companies, fighting for every treatment and piece of equipment. I'd built a successful freelance translation business that allowed me to work from home and care for Emily. My family saw what they expected to see, a dutiful daughter who had settled for an ordinary life. They never bothered to look deeper. The betrayal, Mom, Emily has therapy 3 times a week, I said into the phone, struggling to keep my voice steady. She has school, doctor's appointments, social activities. How is she supposed to? You always make everything so difficult, Mom sighed, that familiar note of exasperation cutting me off. Michael is trying to help the family. He said he'd share the profits once the crypto takes off. This could benefit all of us, including Emily. You need to think about her future security. The irony of her using Emily's future as justification for stealing her present mobility was breathtaking. I hung up before she could say more, before the rage building inside me could explode into words I couldn't take back. Memories flooded back in a crushing wave. Michael borrowing my college fund for his sure-thing investment in a friend's startup that folded within months. Michael convincing our parents to remortgage their house for his failed restaurant where he hired his college buddies as consultants who drank more than they worked. Michael always taking while they smiled and enabled him, all while I was expected to understand and accommodate. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Mom, when are you coming home? The new driver doesn't know how to secure my chair properly. It kept sliding during turns, and I'm scared. Miss you. Love you. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. My sweet, brave girl, trying so hard to adapt while her own family betrayed her. The image of Emily's wheelchair sliding around in some standard transportation service van made my stomach clench with fear and fury. Then my phone rang again. Michael. I almost didn't answer, but the need for confirmation, for him to admit what he'd done directly to me, was too strong. Hey sis, He drawled with that familiar smug tone I'd heard all my life, the tone that said he knew he'd get away with whatever he'd done because he always had. Feeling better? The van? Yeah. Sold it to some guy in Milwaukee. Got a great price too, way more than I expected given how specialized it was. Don't worry, I'll cut you in when the crypto moons. This is huge, Diane, like retirement level huge. You had no right. My voice was deadly quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of emotions whirling inside me. He laughed, actually laughed, the sound both familiar and infuriating. Come on, you're being ridiculous. Emily can use regular transportation like everyone else. Stop being so precious about everything. It's not like she's the only kid with special needs in the world. It was modified specifically for her condition. I fought to control my breathing as pain radiated from my ribs. The positioning, the secure lockdown system, the ramp angle, all of it was calibrated for her specific needs. Yeah, and those modifications cost way too much, he dismissed. Look, I did you a favor. You need to learn to let go sometimes. Not everything has to be so perfectly customized for Emily. You baby her too much. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my hands shaking with rage and helplessness. But underneath the fury, something else stirred, something cold and calculating that had been waiting for this moment. Sarah, who had been sitting quietly by my bedside during these calls, looked at me with concern. Diane, what do you want to do? What my husband taught me to do, I said quietly. Protect Emily at all costs. Flashback the day after Thomas's funeral, Michael showed up at my house with a stack of papers and a sympathetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. The black suit he wore was expensive but rumpled, and the faint smell of alcohol clung to him despite the early hour. You're grieving, he'd said, settling himself at my kitchen table as if he belonged there, spreading documents across the surface. Let me handle the estate. You've got enough on your plate with Emily. I remember staring at him across the table, the surreal feeling of discussing my husband's assets when I just watched his casket being lowered into the ground the day before. I thought about all the times Michael had handled things for our family, the investment schemes, the failed businesses, the mysterious expenses that always seemed to drain joint accounts dry. Thomas had warned me about this very moment during one of our last conversations, his voice barely audible in the hospice room. Your brother will come for it, he'd whispered, the cancer making his voice raspy. He's always seen me as competition for your parents' attention. When I'm gone, he'll try to take whatever he can from you and Emily. Michael wouldn't do that, I'd protested weakly, though even then I wasn't convinced. Thomas had managed a sad smile. You know better, Diane. Promise me you'll be ready. Promise me you'll protect what we've built for Emily. Now, watching Michael flip through estate documents with unusual interest, I saw with perfect clarity what my husband had understood all along. No, I said simply. Michael looked up, startled. What do you mean, no? I'm trying to help you. I mean, no, I don't need your help with the estate. I've already spoken to a lawyer. His expression shifted, the sympathetic facade cracking slightly. A lawyer? That's unnecessary and expensive. This is family business. Exactly, I said, rising from the table. And I'm handling my family's business. That night, after Michael left with my firm, no ringing in his ears, I made a call to David Bennett, a lawyer specializing in estate protection that Thomas had put me in contact with before his death. Thomas's illness had taught me that security isn't just about locks and alarms. It's about being ready when the people you're supposed to trust show their true colors. I need to protect my daughter, I told David when we met the next day in his office, surrounded by law books and the faint smell of coffee. His eyes had narrowed with understanding. From whom? My family. David nodded, not surprised. Thomas mentioned this might happen. He was concerned about your brother's influence over your parents. The realization that Thomas had anticipated this, had already spoken to David about potential threats from my own family, brought both pain and profound gratitude. Even dying, his primary concern had been protecting us. What do I need to do? I asked. Everything, David replied, pulling out a legal pad. Asset protection trusts, banking alerts for unusual activity, documentation of all family transactions, security for your property, and Emily's medical equipment. We're going to build a fortress around what matters most. And that's exactly what we did, piece by meticulous piece, creating a legal and financial safety net that would be invisible until someone tried to breach it, a silent guardian waiting for the day it would be needed. That day had finally arrived. The countermove, what Michael didn't know, what my parents never bothered to learn, was that I'd spent 3 years preparing for something like this. Every account protected, every asset secured, every document carefully filed away. I'd done it all quietly, methodically, while they continued to see me as passive, emotional Diane who needed guidance and control. I opened my banking app and clicked the alert button I'd set up years ago. Within seconds, a notification appeared. Unusual deposit detected. Account flagged for review. Michael's crypto dreams were about to crash and burn, and that would only be the beginning. The hospital room felt smaller with each passing hour, the white walls closing in as I waited for the ripple effects of my actions to reach my brother. I watched Emily through our video chat that evening, my heart breaking as she tried to sound cheerful about missing her art class because the new transport service had canceled last minute. "It's okay, Mom. I can catch up next week," she said, adjusting her glasses that were slightly too big for her face, Thomas's eyes looking back at me from our daughter's face. But I saw the shadow cross her expression, the slight tremor in her voice. Emily had inherited her father's knack for putting others at ease, for hiding her own disappointment to spare those she loved from worry. "Baby, I need to tell you something about the van." "I know," she interrupted softly, her gaze dropping for a moment. "Uncle Michael sold it. I heard Grandma talking about it on the phone." Of course she knew. Emily had always been too perceptive for her own good, just like she'd known something was wrong the day Thomas died, hours before we got the call. She'd insisted on staying home from school, claiming she felt sick, but later confessed she just had a bad feeling that Dad needed her. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have. Don't apologize, Mom. It's not your fault." She cut me off with a maturity that sometimes stole my breath. She paused, then added, "Grandma said we were being selfish about the van anyway, that normal families don't need special vehicles." The familiar rage bubbled up, hot and bitter in my throat. I remembered all the times they dismissed Emily's needs, the birthday parties at inaccessible venues, the family vacations planned without considering her wheelchair, the constant refrain of, "You're babying her too much," whenever I spoke up. Last Christmas, they'd rented a cabin with 3 steps to enter and no accessible bathroom, then acted surprised when we couldn't stay. "But we got such a good deal," Mom had protested. "Surely Thomas could just carry her in?" Thomas had been dead for 2 years by then, and Emily, at 11, was already too heavy for me to safely carry up and down stairs multiple times a day. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Michael just tried to withdraw $50,000 from his account. Bank flagged it as suspicious. He's throwing a fit at the downtown branch. Manager called me since I'm listed as your emergency contact." I smiled despite myself. The pieces were falling into place. "Emily, honey, I need to make some calls. I'll video chat you again before bedtime, okay?" "Okay, Mom." Her voice wavered. "Are you going to fight with them again?" The question held echoes of so many past confrontations, me advocating for Emily's needs, my parents and Michael dismissing them, the inevitable retreat where I'd swallow my anger to keep the peace. Emily had witnessed this dance her entire life. "No, baby," I said with quiet certainty. "This time I'm going to win." After hanging up, I called David. He answered immediately. "Diane, I've been expecting your call." Sarah filled me in about the van. "What are your options?" "Well, your brother committed fraud by selling property he had no legal right to," he said, his voice calm but tinged with righteous indignation. "I've already started the paperwork to freeze his assets and trace the sale. But there's something else you should know." I held my breath, wincing as my ribs protested. "The money he got from the van, he tried to use it as collateral for a massive loan. When that got flagged, he attempted to move it through your parents' accounts." I laughed bitterly. "Let me guess. They helped him?" "They tried. But remember those protections we put in place after Thomas died? They're working exactly as intended." Every transfer attempt creates another alert, another digital breadcrumb. He's essentially documenting his own fraud in real time. After Robert's death, I'd learned the hard way about financial vulnerability. Michael had tried to contest the will, claiming I wasn't stable enough to manage Thomas's estate, that I was too emotional in my grief to make sound decisions for Emily. That's when I'd met David and started building my safety net, stone by careful stone. Your brother's getting desperate, David continued. He's made 3 attempts to access different accounts in the last hour. Each attempt triggers another red flag. The bank's fraud department is taking notice. Good. What's next? We wait. The bank's fraud department is already investigating. Once they connect the dots between the van sale and these suspicious transactions. He didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what would follow. My phone buzzed again, a text from Mom. Michael said you're causing problems at the bank. Why can't you ever think about anyone but yourself? He needs that money for his investment. This could have benefited the whole family. I showed the message to the nurse who was checking my vitals. She shook her head in disbelief. Family can be worse than the accident that put you here, she said quietly, adjusting my four. Mine certainly is, I agreed. Another notification popped up, an email from Lisa, Emily's physical therapist. Documentation of transportation difficulties affecting therapy schedule attached. Let me know if you need anything else for the legal proceedings. I'd forgotten I'd asked her to document everything. Sweet, thorough Lisa, building my case without even knowing it. My phone rang again, Michael's wife Jessica this time. I hesitated, then answered. Diane, what the hell is going on? Her voice was shrill with panic. Michael can't access any of his accounts. We have a mortgage payment due tomorrow. That's strange, I replied calmly. Maybe he should check with the crypto exchange he was so excited about. This isn't funny. We have bills to pay. So did we, but Michael sold our van anyway. She went quiet for a moment. He said you agreed to it. I was unconscious in a hospital bed. Oh, another pause. Oh God, the realization in her voice was palpable. After she hung up, I closed my eyes and thought about Emily's question. Was I going to fight with them again? No, fighting implied a fair contest, an equal exchange. This wasn't going to be a fight. My phone pinged with another alert. Large withdrawal attempt declined. Account suspended pending investigation. I smiled. This was going to be a reckoning. The chaos started at exactly 9:47 a.m. The next day. I know because I was watching the clock when Michael's first panic call came through to my hospital room. The morning sunlight filtering through the blinds created stripes across my bed, and a janitor was quietly mopping the hallway floor outside my door. What the hell is happening? Michael's voice cracked with desperation. I can't access anything. Not checking, not savings, not investment accounts. Nothing. Really? How inconvenient for you. My voice was calm, almost conversational. Almost like having your transportation sold without permission. This isn't funny, Diane. I have meetings with investors today. His voice rose in pitch. People are expecting me to show them returns. I was supposed to transfer funds this morning. Gambling debts aren't investments, Michael. The line went silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was low, dangerous. What do you know about that? Everything. The casino receipts, the loans, the forged paperwork. Would you like me to continue? I'm quite familiar with your trips to Vegas and Atlantic City. The Bellagio seems to be a particular favorite. You little, careful, I interrupted. Everything you say is being recorded for the investigation. He hung up. 3 minutes later, my parents called. I put the phone on speaker as David had advised, in case they said anything we could use. Your brother is at our house crying, Mom said, accusation heavy in her voice. Fix this immediately. Fix what? The fraud he committed, the theft, the lying, she said, as if I was being deliberately obtuse. He made a mistake. We're family. We're supposed to forgive. Dad chimed in, his voice carrying that familiar note of disappointment he'd reserved just for me since childhood. This isn't how your mother and I raised you. Like you forgave me when I needed help with Emily's medical bills? Or when Michael contested Thomas's will? The bitterness I'd swallowed for years rose up, sharp and clarifying. Where was family loyalty then? That was different, Mom snapped. Michael was trying to protect the family money. From what? A disabled child? The words hung in the air, exposing the ugly truth we'd all danced around for years. Was Emily's wheelchair too expensive for the family budget? Her therapy? Her education? Flashback the diagnosis. When Emily was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy at 5, my parents' first reaction wasn't concern for their granddaughter, it was worry about appearances. We sat in the specialist's office, Thomas and I still reeling from the diagnosis, when my mother's first question took me by surprise. These things skip generations, Mom had said, as if searching her family tree for someone to blame. Nobody in our family has ever had problems like this. She emphasized the word problems, as if Emily's condition was somehow shameful, a defect rather than a medical reality. Dad was more practical in his coldly analytical way. Have you considered institutions? The financial burden of special needs care is enormous. You need to think about your futures too, not just hers. Thomas had gripped my hand so hard I could feel his wedding ring cutting into my skin. Emily is our daughter, not a burden, he'd said, his voice trembling with barely controlled rage. And we won't be considering institutions. Of course not, Dad backpedaled, though his expression remained doubtful. I'm just saying you need to be realistic about the challenges ahead. Your brother has some contacts in the medical insurance industry who might help with managing costs. Later that night, as we researched treatment options online, Thomas had looked at me with fierce determination. We need to be ready for a lifetime of fighting for her. Your family, the insurance companies, the schools, everyone will try to make her life smaller. Our job is to make sure her world stays as wide open as possible. I didn't fully understand what he meant then. But as the years passed, I watched my parents consistently prioritize appearances over Emily's needs. They bought her pretty dresses but complained about the cost of her wheelchair. They bragged about her artistic talents to friends but balked at paying for accessible art classes. They loved the idea of a granddaughter but seemed perpetually disappointed with the reality of ours. I didn't know then how prophetic Thomas's words would be, or that the first real battle would come from within my own family. The confrontation. Don't twist our words, Dad shouted through the phone, breaking me from my memories. You've always been so dramatic, so. So what? So unwilling to let Michael steal from me, so protective of my daughter? You're betraying your family. Mom was crying now, those familiar theatrical sobs that had worked on me since childhood. After everything we've done for you. I laughed, a cold, hard sound that surprised even me. That wasn't my betrayal. It was my protection. After hanging up, I texted Sarah, "How's Emily? Safe at my house." Your brother just drove by looking angry. He didn't stop, but I've locked the doors just in case. Alarm shot through me. I called the police immediately, my hands shaking as I explained the situation. My injured ribs screamed in protest as my breathing quickened, but I pushed through it. Then I dialed David. "Already on it," he said before I could speak. "Filed a restraining order 10 minutes ago. Police are aware and sending a patrol car to Sarah's neighborhood." Another call came in. Michael's wife, Jessica, again. "The bank called his office," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "They're launching a formal investigation. I know the things they're saying he did are all true." She started crying. "He said it was just a bad investment that he could fix. He said that about the restaurant too, and the tech startup, and the real estate scheme. What am I supposed to do now?" "Get a good lawyer," I advised, feeling a pang of sympathy despite everything. Jessica had been manipulated by Michael too, just in different ways. "And separate your accounts while you still can." The next call came from Michael's office, his supervisor sounding stiff and formal. "Mrs. Miller, we need to verify some information about certain financial transactions involving your brother." I directed them to David, as we planned. Within an hour, Michael was suspended pending investigation. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Uncle Michael just called Grandma. She's crying really loud." "Are you okay, Mom?" "I'm fine, baby. Stay with Sarah. I typed, then added, I love you. Everything's going to be all right. I know what you're doing, she replied, and for a moment my heart stopped. But her next message brought tears to my eyes. I'm not mad. He shouldn't have taken my van. Tears prickled my eyes. My brilliant, perceptive daughter, understanding more than she should have to at 12 years old. A nurse came in to check my vitals. Your blood pressure's up, she noted, frowning at the monitor. Need me to restrict visitors? No, they won't come here. They never do when things get difficult. In all the days I'd been hospitalized, neither my parents nor Michael had visited once. She patted my hand. Family troubles often hurt worse than physical injuries. Let me know if you need anything for anxiety. My phone lit up again, a detective this time. Mrs. Miller, we're looking into reports of fraudulent asset transfer and harassment. Do you have documentation of the original van ownership? My lawyer will send everything. And the suspect, your brother? He's been to your property? Ask my friend Sarah. She has security footage from when he drove by her house this morning. After the detective hung up, I closed my eyes, exhausted but resolute. The machinery of justice was moving now, grinding slowly but inexorably towards its conclusion. A final text came through from Michael. You think you've won. You have no idea what's coming. I showed it to David when he stopped by with more paperwork. Empty threats, he said dismissively. He's cornered, and he knows it. This is good for our case, shows continued harassment. Will it be enough, David? You've documented everything for years, the fraud, the theft, the pattern of financial abuse. Trust me, it's more than enough. Your brother isn't nearly as clever as he thinks he is. His financial trail is a mess, and now that the banks and his employer are involved, everything will come to light. As if to confirm his words, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Local business executive under investigation for financial crimes. I thought of Emily's drawing, the crack in the ground between us and them. It wasn't a crack anymore. It was a chasm, and they were the ones who dug it. My phone lit up one last time that day, a message from the van buyer. I didn't know it was stolen. I'll return it. I want no part of this. The pieces were falling into place, but somehow victory felt hollow. I hadn't wanted this war. I just wanted my family to respect my daughter's needs. Flashback the promise. On Thomas's last day, as sunlight filtered through the hospice window and cast golden squares on the sterile floor, he'd made me promise something. His body was ravaged by the cancer, but his eyes were clear and focused, holding mine with an intensity that belied his physical weakness. You're going to face pressure, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the soft beeping of monitors. From your family, from the world. They'll try to make you and Emily fit into smaller boxes. I gripped his hand, careful to avoid the foreline. I know, don't let them, he said, his eyes suddenly fierce. Whatever it takes, Diane. Promise me. I promise, I whispered, tears flowing freely down my cheeks. And don't. He paused, struggling for breath. Don't let the guilt stop you. Your parents, your brother, they raised you to feel guilty for taking up space, for having needs. But Emily deserves her full space in this world. She does, I said, wiping my tears with my free hand. Sometimes. He closed his eyes, gathering strength. Sometimes love means making hard choices. Choices that might look cruel to others, but are actually the most compassionate thing in the long run. What do you mean? I asked, leaning closer. He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Your family, they're drowning, Dan. Your brother's addictions, your parents' enabling, they're all drowning and they're trying to pull you and Emily down with them. I won't let them, I promised. It's more than that, he said, his voice growing urgent. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone who's drowning is to let them face the consequences of their actions. It's the only way they'll ever learn to swim. I didn't fully understand what he meant then. Now, watching through my hospital window as evening shadows lengthened across the parking lot, I finally did. The recovery. The doctors finally cleared me to go home a week later, but the war was far from over. My body was healing, the ribs still painful but mending. The leg cast a constant reminder of the accident. but the deeper wounds inflicted by my family remained raw and open. Each day brought new developments in what was rapidly becoming a local scandal, and I seized every opportunity for justice. Sarah helped me settle back into my home, now equipped with temporary ramps for my wheelchair while my leg healed, an ironic parallel to Emily's situation that wasn't lost on either of us. It's like the universe wanted you to experience mobility issues firsthand, Sarah commented as she helped me navigate the modified bathroom. I already understood plenty about accessibility challenges, I replied. But I appreciate the universe's commitment to driving the point home. David reported during his daily visit. The board wants a full audit of Michael's accounts. They've put him on indefinite leave, and they're talking criminal charges. The fraud appears to extend well beyond the van incident, embezzlement, falsified expense reports, unauthorized use of company resources. My phone buzzed, Michael's wife Jessica calling. He's drinking constantly, she whispered, her voice tight with fear. He keeps saying he'll make you pay. Last night, he threw a glass at the wall and said he should have taken care of you after Thomas died. A chill ran through me. Record everything, I advised, and change your locks. If he threatens you directly, call the police immediately. I've already packed a bag, she said. I'm staying with my sister tonight. Next, I contacted every financial institution Michael had ever dealt with, armed with proof of his fraudulent activities. One by one, his credit lines crumbled. David had prepared meticulous documentation packages showing the pattern of fraud, the forged signatures, the misappropriated funds. Each time another account was frozen or credit line revoked, I felt a grim satisfaction, not joy, but the cold comfort of justice being served. Sarah brought Emily home the day after I returned, wheeling her carefully into the living room where I was propped up on the couch. My daughter's eyes were sharp, observant, taking in my cast and the careful way I held my ribs when I moved. You look like I do after a bad fall, she said, with a hint of her father's dry humor. Probably feel like it too, I replied, holding out my arms to her. She wheeled closer so I could hug her. I've missed you so much. Uncle Michael came to Grandma's house again yesterday, she said as she settled back in her chair. He was yelling about Bitcoin and betrayal. Did he scare you? No. Sarah called the police, like we discussed. They took him away. I squeezed her hand. I'm sorry you have to see all this. Her voice was firm, suddenly sounding so much older than 12. He hurt us, Mom. He always hurt us. After Sarah took Emily upstairs to unpack, I checked my email. Jessica's lawyer had sent documentation, bank statements showing years of hidden gambling debts, forged signatures, emptied accounts. He took everything. She'd written in her accompanying note, just like he took Emily's van. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. A knock at the door made me jump. It was Sarah, looking worried. Your parents are telling people you're having a mental breakdown, she said, keeping her voice low so Emily wouldn't hear upstairs. That you're persecuting Michael because of trauma from Thomas's death. I laughed bitterly. Are they also telling people about the fraud investigation? The police reports? The bank records? They're saying it's all a misunderstanding that Michael had permission from. She trailed off, raising an eyebrow. From who? Mike Coma? I shook my head in disbelief. The depth of their denial is almost impressive. My phone lit up, Mom calling again. I ignored it. How's the job search going for Michael? I asked Sarah. Not good. His suspension made the local business papers. Nobody's touching him. Your parents are trying to arrange some position with one of their country club friends, but even they seem reluctant. Another knock. This time it was a delivery, a large envelope with no return address. Inside were old family photos, slashed with scissors. A note fell out. You did this to us. I showed Sarah, who immediately called the police to report the harassment. They'll want to dust for fingerprints, she said. Don't touch anything else. Upstairs, I could hear Emily laughing with Lisa, who'd arrived for an in-home therapy session. The sound made my chest tight with unexpected emotion. When was the last time I had heard her laugh like that? Before the accident, before the van theft, before all of this ugliness erupted? My phone buzzed with a text from David. Michael tried to access your parents' home equity line. It triggered our fraud alert. Banks freezing that too. Good, I replied. What's next? Police want to interview your parents about the forged documents. They're not cooperating. Of course they weren't. They never did when it came to Michael, always protecting him, always making excuses, always enabling his worst impulses while expecting the rest of the world to do the same. Lisa came downstairs as her session with Emily ended. She's getting stronger, she reported with professional satisfaction. But she mentioned having nightmares about the van being stolen again, about being trapped somewhere without her mobility aids. The thought of my daughter's sleep being haunted by her uncle's actions twisted something painful inside me. We're getting the old van back soon, I told Lisa, but we're planning to sell it and get a new one. Smart move. Trauma can attach to objects. She hesitated, then handed me a business card. This is a great family therapist for when you're ready. For both of you. After she left, I made my way upstairs to find Emily in her room, drawing at her adapted desk. She was quieter than usual, her brow furrowed in concentration. You okay, baby? I asked from the doorway. She didn't look up from her drawing. Grandma called my phone today. She said. She said we're breaking up the family. That you're punishing everyone because you're angry and bitter. Anger flashed through me, hot and immediate. She shouldn't be calling you directly. That's inappropriate. What did you tell her? That they broke it first. She finally looked up, her eyes, so like Thomas's, serious and searching. Mom, are we going to be okay? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with an alert from the security system. Motion detected in the driveway. We both turned to the tablet mounted on Emily's wall that displayed our security feeds. Michael was stumbling around the van that had been returned the day before, something glinting in his hand. Is that a key? Emily whispered, her body tense. No, I said, already dialing 911. It's a knife. We watched in silence as police cars arrived minutes later, lights flashing across the darkening yard. Michael tried to run but didn't get far, his movements uncoordinated from what was clearly intoxication. The officers tackled him to the ground near the mailbox, the knife flying from his hand. Vandalism and violation of restraining order. David texted later that evening after calling his contacts at the police department. He's in custody. They're holding him this time in multiple violations, clear danger to property and potentially persons. That night, after the police had gone and Sarah had finally headed home, I found Emily staring at the van through her bedroom window. The security lights illuminated it in the driveway, the scratches Michael had managed to carve into the side panels visible even from a distance. We'll get a new one, I promised, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Something better. It's not about the van anymore, is it? Her perception always startled me. No, baby, it's not. It was about safety, about boundaries, about consequences. She nodded wisely. Sometimes the things that are supposed to help us move forward just keep us stuck in the past instead. I hugged her tight, marveling at her insight. When did you get so smart? Dad told me lots of things before he died, she said simply. He said I should remember them for both of us. My phone buzzed again, another angry text from my parents. I deleted it without reading it. Some things weren't worth saving, but others, like the sound of Emily's laughter during therapy, were worth every battle it took to protect them. The confrontation. The day I finally confronted my parents face to face, it was raining, a steady, soaking Minnesota rain that turned the world gray and indistinct. 3 weeks had passed since Michael's arrest, and the legal consequences of his actions were beginning to crystallize into something permanent and life-altering. I stood on their porch listening to the wind chimes Thomas had given them years ago, wondering if they even remembered who'd bought them. The house looked different somehow, not physically, but as if my perception of it had shifted. This place that had once represented authority and permanence now seemed fragile, built on a foundation of pretense and denial. Mom opened the door, looking older than I remembered. Her carefully maintained blonde hair showed dark roots, and her designer outfit had been replaced with a simple sweater and slacks. Come to gloat? She asked, but the usual bite in her voice was muted. No, I came for answers. The house was eerily quiet as I followed her inside, my cane thumping softly on the hardwood floors. My leg was healing, but still needed support. Dad sat in his recliner staring at muted financial news, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand despite the early hour. The room smelled stale, as if the windows hadn't been opened in days. Michael is gone, he said flatly, not looking at me. Left town after posting bail. Blamed you, of course. Of course he did. I remained standing, surveying the living room where so many family dramas had played out over the decades. Did he tell you about the gambling debts? Before or after he sold Emily's van? He was trying to help the family. Mom snapped with the automatic defense she'd been using for decades. By stealing from his niece? It wasn't stealing. He had paperwork. Forged paperwork, Mom, I interrupted, while I was unconscious. Would you like to see the proof? The forensic analysis of the signatures? The notary stamp that doesn't exist in any state registry? We don't need to see your proof, Dad said wearily, finally turning to look at me. His eyes were bloodshot, his complexion sallow. You were always so dramatic about everything. I pulled out my phone, opened a document. Remember when you co-signed that home equity line last month? The one Michael said was for his new business? They exchanged nervous glances. Want to know what it was really for? Casino markers. 7 figures worth. Mom's face went pale. You're lying. The bank has all the documentation. They're investigating it as fraud. Did you know that's a felony when it involves property liens? What are you saying? Dad's voice shook for the first time in my memory. I'm saying you helped Michael launder money through your house. The bank's foreclosure notice should arrive tomorrow. Mom collapsed onto the couch, her hand flying to her throat in a gesture that would have seemed theatrical if it wasn't so genuine. That's impossible, he promised. Like he promised to pay back my college fund? I asked quietly. Or Emily's medical bills? Or Thomas's life insurance money he tried to steal? You ungrateful little. Mom started to rise, her face contorted with a mixture of rage and desperation. Careful, I warned. Everything here is being recorded for the investigation. I gestured to my phone, which was indeed recording as David had advised. Dad's hands trembled around his glass. We can fix this if you just drop the charges. Like you dropped us every time we needed help? I asked, the bitterness I'd suppressed for years finally finding voice. Like you dropped Emily when Michael said her medical equipment was too expensive for family vacations? You were always so selfish, Mom screamed, her composure finally cracking completely. Always demanding special treatment for you and Emily. Always making everything so difficult. Basic mobility isn't special treatment, Mom, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. But you never understood that, did you? You never saw Emily as a person with needs, just an inconvenience, a flaw in your perfect family picture. I pulled out another document from my bag. Here's something interesting. Michael used your house as collateral for his gambling debt 6 times in the last year. Did you even read what you were signing? Or did you just trust whatever story he told you? Their silence was answer enough. The bank's freezing everything, I continued. No joy in delivering this news despite the justice it represented. They'll take the house within the month. I'd start packing. You can't do this to us, Dad whispered, suddenly looking every one of his 73 years. We're your parents. No, I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke the words. You're Michael's enablers and now you're his co-conspirators. You stopped being parents the moment you decided that protecting him was more important than the well-being of your granddaughter. Mom started crying. Those familiar theatrical sobs that had always worked to manipulate me before. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done? I laughed coldly. Let's list it. Ignored Emily's needs, enabled Michael's theft, defended fraud, gaslit me about abuse. Did I miss anything? Get out, Dad said quietly. Just get out, gladly, but first. I placed a final document on their coffee table. The doll wants to interview you about the forged paperwork. I'd get a good lawyer. As I turned to leave, Mom called out, You'll regret this. Family is all we have. I paused at the door, the rain visible through the sidelights, running down the glass in rivulets. No, Mom, family is what we choose, and I choose Emily. Outside, the rain had stopped, though water still dripped from the eaves. I got in my car and called Emily at Sarah's house, where she was spending the day while I handled this confrontation. Did you see them? She asked immediately. Yes. Are they sorry? I considered lying, softening the reality, but Emily deserved the truth. No, they're just angry they got caught. She was quiet for a moment. Can we get ice cream on the way home? I smiled, feeling lighter somehow despite the heaviness of what had just transpired. Of course we can. My phone buzzed, a text from Jessica. He's gone. Left a note blaming everyone else. Classic Michael. Then another from David. Banks moving forward with foreclosure. Your parents have 30 days. I drove to Sarah's house, thinking about family legacies, about patterns broken and patterns repeated, about the weight of lies and the freedom of truth. Emily was waiting outside, beaming. I got an A on my art project. That's wonderful, baby. Ice cream, definitely. As we drove away, she asked quietly, are we bad people, Mom, for letting them lose everything? I thought about years of manipulation, of watching her struggle while they enabled Michael's destruction. No, I said firmly. They lost everything because they chose to. We just chose not to save them from themselves. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Sometimes love means letting people face their consequences. Exactly. My phone buzzed one last time, Mom again. I declined the call. Some chapters needed to end for new ones to begin. Epilogue and New Beginnings. The new van arrived on a sunny morning 6 weeks after the confrontation with my parents. It gleamed white in the October sunshine, with Emily's name proudly displayed on the registration papers. The adaptations were even better than the previous vehicle, a smoother lift mechanism, more secure lockdowns for the wheelchair, an emergency communication system. Emily wheeled herself around it in the driveway, inspecting every detail with the thoroughness she'd inherited from her father. It's perfect, she declared after a complete circuit. And nobody can take it away. Nobody, I confirmed, watching her face light up. It's yours completely. My phone buzzed. Another block number. They'd been calling daily since my parents lost the house, since Michael disappeared somewhere out west, leaving a trail of bad checks and broken promises. Sometimes it was my mother, sometimes unknown numbers that were likely my father or other relatives they'd enlisted to pressure me. Still getting calls? Sarah asked, helping Emily test the new wheelchair lift. She'd been by her side through everything, stepping seamlessly into the role of extended family that my blood relatives had abandoned. They'll stop eventually, I said, watching Emily's careful navigation of the lift controls. Have you heard where my parents moved? Some rental across town. They're telling people you destroyed the family. Sarah's tone made it clear what she thought of that narrative. They destroyed it themselves, I said quietly. I just refused to help them hide the rubble. Emily's voice cut through our conversation. Mom, come look at this. She had decorated her section of the van with art from her therapy sessions, bright, hopeful paintings of butterflies and open skies. The most striking was a watercolor depicting two figures, clearly Emily and me, standing on solid ground while behind them was the outline of a house crumbling into dust. No more cracks in the ground, no more divided families. Just us, moving forward. Beautiful, I said, fighting tears. Don't cry, Mom. This is a happy thing. Emily reached up to squeeze my hand. This is our fresh start. Just then, the security camera pinged, showing movement at the front gate. I checked my phone to see my mother standing there, clutching an envelope, her appearance noticeably different from when I'd seen her at their house. Her hair was unstyled, her clothes simple and slightly rumpled. Want me to call the police? Sarah asked, immediately protective. No, let me handle this. I limped down the driveway, my injured leg almost healed but still stiff. I walked to the gate. Mom looked smaller somehow, her designer clothes replaced with discount store brands, her carefully maintained appearance showing signs of neglect. What do you want? To give you this. She thrust the envelope through the gate. It's Michael's confession. He sent it to us before he disappeared. Her voice was flat, defeated. I opened it carefully, pages of angry scrawl detailing years of theft, fraud, and manipulation, his signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized. It was exactly what the Dunn needed to solidify the case, to ensure Michael faced consequences if he was ever found. Why are you giving me this? Because. She swallowed hard, her eyes rimmed with red. Because you were right about everything. From the driveway, I heard Emily's voice. Grandma? Mom's eyes filled with tears as she caught sight of her granddaughter. She's gotten so big. Kids do that, even the ones you ignore. Diane, please. Her voice cracked. The confession is enough. Can I just tell her goodbye? I know we're moving out of state next week. Your father found a job in Arizona. No. You lost that right when you chose Michael over her safety. The words were harsh, but necessary. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. Some wounds couldn't be healed. I turned to walk away, but her voice stopped me, smaller than I'd ever heard it. I'm sorry. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry. I looked back. You're right, it is too late. Returning to the driveway, I found Emily watching curiously. Was Grandma crying? Yes. Good, she said simply. Sometimes people need to cry to learn. I hugged her tight, amazed by her wisdom. My phone buzzed, Jessica calling. Police found Michael in Las Vegas. More fraud charges. He's asking for help. I showed Emily the message. She considered it carefully, her young face serious. Are you going to help him? No. Some people only learn through consequences. Those consequences would likely include jail time now, with the confession in hand. She nodded, then brightened. Can we take the van to my art class? I want to show everyone. Of course. As we loaded up, Lisa arrived for Emily's therapy session and signed off on the final mobility assessment. She's thriving, she observed. Stronger every day. Yes, I agreed, watching Emily confidently operate the new equipment. We both are. Watching Emily operate the lift herself, confidently maneuvering her wheelchair into position, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace exactly, the wounds were still too fresh for that, but something like victory tempered with wisdom. My phone lit up one last time. The DA's office confirming receipt of Michael's confession. Emily caught my concerned look. It's okay, Mom. I'm not scared anymore. No, because you showed me something important. What's that? That sometimes loving people means letting them fall, and sometimes falling means they finally learn to see what's really important. I watched her settle into the van, arranging her art supplies, chatting with Sarah about her next project, strong, independent, unafraid. Revenge didn't give me back what I lost, but it showed them what happens when you take from someone who still has something left to lose. And more importantly, it showed Emily that she was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. That was worth everything. As I climbed into the driver's seat, I caught sight of the wind chimes Thomas had given my parents hanging now from our porch, the one thing I'd taken from their house. Not out of sentiment for them, but as a reminder of the man who taught me what family really means. Ready to go? I asked, glancing back at Emily. Ready? She smiled, her eyes on the road ahead.